All right, guys. So as we close out 2024 and head into 2025, it's about time we start talking about what's coming up in 2025, and it's really exciting because I've done some podcast episodes previewing why I think 2025 will be a great year for movies and TV, but it's starting to get real. And along with all of that comes, of course, news, and we have our first official synopsis, it seems like, for the Fantastic Four First Steps. Now, I actually originally wasn't going to cover it because, on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, on the Access Blockbusters Pod, I don't like to cover news just for the sake of news, like, oh, new picture of Deadpool in Deadpool costume. That's not really what I'm here for. I would much rather cover something if I believe it's trying to say, or it has something else to say, if there are more interesting things to glean from it, and if I can maybe give some analysis and talk about my feelings about this. So honestly, when I was reading this first synopsis for Fantastic Four First Steps, I initially was going, no, I don't think we need to talk about this until we get to the end, because the beginning is very generic, and I was like, okay, so nothing really here. But the more you get into the synopsis, the more interesting it gets and the more implications it might have for what the story could be. So I wanted to talk about it pretty briefly here and see what we can gain from this plot synopsis. So I'm going to start here. The article that I have here from the Direct, it's broken up into 3 parts, and I think that actually works really well because, we can talk about the 3 different parts. But I wanted to start just reading the synopsis, part 1, and then talking about my thoughts, part 2 talking about my thoughts, and then part 3 talking about my thoughts, and seeing if we can't, get something out of this. So here we go. The first chunk of the Fantastic Four First Steps plot synopsis. And, it's not, again, it's pretty generic, right? This first part here. It's more just the marketing part of it all. So this is what it says. Quote, set against the vibrant backdrop of a 1960s-inspired retro-futuristic world, Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps introduces Marvel's first family. Reed Richards / Mr. Fantastic, Pedro Pascal, Sue Storm / Invisible Woman, Vanessa Kirby, Johnny Storm / Human Torch, Joseph Quinn, and Ben Grimm / The Thing, Ebon Moss-Bachrach, as they face their most daunting challenge yet. Okay, so that's the first part. Again, very generic. Most of what is interesting about this quote is what we already knew. It's set in a 1960s-inspired retro-futuristic world. In an alternate universe is not what it says here, but it pretty much is implied, and we all know that that's what's going to happen. So here, nothing that interesting. And again, like I said, when I first read this, I was going, this isn't really that interesting. But then we get into the second part and the third part. So the second part of the synopsis goes like this. Quote, forced to balance their roles as heroes with the strength of their family bond, they must defend Earth from a ravenous space god called Galactus, Ralph Ineson, and his enigmatic herald, Silver Surfer, Julia Garner. Okay, so that's more interesting, right? Because now we get a sense of what's actually going on here. First of all, Galactus, it seems like, is going to be the main villain of the Fantastic Four First Steps. Maybe that was obvious, maybe not. Because, Galactus has been used in the past as just sort of an entity, right? Just this looming threat, while other villains like Silver Surfer, other Fantastic Four villains, Doctor Doom, are the main central focus points of those films and those comic book storylines. But it seems like here, it is very clearly Galactus that is going to be the main threat of the Fantastic Four First Steps. That's really interesting. Also interesting that they started out this quote by saying, forced to balance their roles as heroes with the strength of their family bond. Again, I think that's all encouraging because, you want to emphasize the fact that they are a family and that they are, these are superheroes, but they also mean a lot to one another as people. I think that is a really good thing to focus on as well. And enigmatic herald, Silver Surfer, Julia Garner obviously, playing, I forget the name of this Silver Surfer compared to the traditional male Silver Surfer. They have actual names, and I totally forgot what they are. I think Shyla Ball, something like that. But anyways, it's another confirmation that we're going to be getting some Silver Surfer stuff going on here as well. But the third part of the synopsis is honestly what caught my attention the most. So here is the last little bit of the synopsis that has been released. It says, quote, and if Galactus's plans to devour the entire planet and everyone on it weren't bad enough, it suddenly gets very personal. Okay, now that's really interesting, right? Because again, it's a very vague quote in the sense of, sure, that could mean a whole lot of things. It could mean anything, right? It could mean Galactus eats one of Reed Richards' cousins and it gets very personal. It could mean that, Galactus takes Ben Grimm prisoner. It could mean a whole host of anything. But my mind immediately jumps to one thing, because what is, other than the family part of it, right? When you think about Fantastic Four and you think about personal stakes, what is the one character that usually jumps to mind? It would be Victor Von Doom, right? Because Victor Von Doom, the traditional backstory between Victor Von Doom and Reed Richards is that they were best friends growing up, and then they form this rivalry, and Victor always feels like he has been slighted and wronged by Reed, and it's a very personal kind of feud that's going on between these two characters. So interesting, because again, it suddenly gets very personal, could allude to a whole host of things, but, one can't help but wonder, does this hint at maybe a Doctor Doom appearance in Fantastic Four First Steps, more than just the presumed cameo or presumed, and we're talking about the Robert Downey Jr. version, because who knows, maybe Robert Downey Jr.'s version shows up somewhere else. Maybe this could be a different version of Doctor Doom, who knows? But, other than maybe the presumed cameo or post-credit scenes, could this mean that Doctor Doom has more of a role here than we thought? Again, it could be anything, right? It could be Galactus, takes half the family hostage, Galactus kills somebody that they care about, but it's interesting that it seems to contrast, right? Galactus's plan to, quote, Galactus's plan to devour the entire planet and everyone on it weren't enough, right? That's sort of the contrast of the first part. And then the second part, quote, it suddenly gets very personal. So I wonder what that could mean, because I think that actually is our window into some of the more surprising elements of this film and what they could mean. I think it's still 50-50 whether or not that's referring to Doom at all. But we'll have to see about that. Guys, let me know in the comments down below. What do you think of this first synopsis for the Fantastic Four First Steps? Do you think it means Doctor Doom is showing up, or maybe not? Let me know in the comments down below.